Peace and blessings, everybody. It's Thursday, May the 16th, the year 2019, and we're going to take our time in this video. We're going to go through some documents that have been made available by a friend of Schaeffer Cox, and we're going to read them into YouTube. In case you don't want to go download the documents and read them yourself, I'm just going to read them into a video, and we want to thank the people that made these documents available. Also, I don't think most people can fathom the wickedness of the counterterrorism unit, the communications management unit prisons in Marion, Illinois, or Terre Haute, Indiana. I don't think you can fathom how wicked these people are in the FBI and also the Bureau of Prisons. And because you can't fathom how wicked they are, you're not able to grasp what's really going on here. Schaeffer was kidnapped, set up, and entrapped. After he was put in an illegal secret CMU prison to manage his communications, the FBI sent an infiltrator to derail his fundraising efforts that were being done by the Alaskans for Liberty Board. Now Schaeffer's having to bring a lawsuit against those people because they were raising money in Schaeffer's name and they were not asking Schaeffer what to do with the money. How evil is that? I'm going to raise a bunch of money. We're going to decide how to spend it. But when Schaeffer writes us letters, or when Schaeffer tries to call us, we're going to deny the phone calls and we're going to return the letters unopened. He only gets 2 damn phone calls a week. You're not going to take his phone call when you hear the phone ringing and you know it's from Schaeffer. You're going to reject the phone call. Every piece of communications from these prisoners are precious because you don't know when that will be taken away by the devils. So these documents were made available tonight or today, and we're going to read them. Also, you need to know that not only did they derail Schaeffer's legal fundraising efforts, so Angela Cox had to come in, and she is, thank God for her and her efforts to bring it back on track. And now Schaeffer has input into how the funds are spent. So praise God for Angela carrying that burden. But we also have the murder of Robert David Neal because he was implementing legal action against the Bureau of Prisons. He specifically called out abuses by the BOP director. His name is Charles E. Samuels Jr., and Robert David Neal was murdered, beheaded in November of 2018. So you've also got the torture of being put in the shoe within the communications management unit, and all of the phone calls and the letters are managed. And if you try to tell anybody about the torture in the CMU shoe, keep in mind SHU stands for Special Housing Unit. It's basically the whole. And the SHU for CMU is different than the SHU for general population. And it's they built the room right over a steam pipe, and it causes the floor to boil where you can't even stand on it. So you've got all of that going on, and then you have the prison mail room diverting mail that's outgoing so that none of the prisoners can file their legal forms properly. And then you have the mail room banning people like me, and all the incoming mail gets filtered, and they don't let any incoming mail in that they don't want to get in. They basically just do whatever they want to do, and they know the American people don't give a damn. And so if they torture these people, if they deprive them of due process by diverting their mail, if they don't let them make phone calls, if they torture them in the CMU, hell, even if they allow them to get murdered and coordinate the murder, you know the American people don't give a damn about prisoners. But we're going to read these letters. And here we go. There's 4 of them, and I'm going to take my time when we read them. This is a statement by a woman by the name of Elizabeth Sarver. Okay, and I'm just going to read the statement. This is in a case of Francis Schaeffer Cox versus Terry Dodd et al. Terry Dodd is believed to be an FBI informant who was derailing the legal fundraising efforts of Schaeffer Cox. Statement on behalf of the plaintiff. This is from Elizabeth Sarver. I am writing on behalf of the plaintiff, political prisoner Francis Schaeffer Cox, federal inmate number 16179-006. My name is Elizabeth A. Sarver, and I have been working closely with the plaintiff for 4.5 years. Over this time, I have become familiar with his criminal case as well as the civil suits that the plaintiff has filed. I have personal knowledge of the plaintiff's effort to raise funds for his legal defense with the Alaskans for Liberty Board. The plaintiff has received FOIA documents that indicate that the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigations, sent in defendant Terry Dodd to the board of the AFL to be an informant. Evidence leads us to believe that overt actions were taken to sabotage the plaintiff's appeal. Terry Dodd's FBI handler in Anchorage, Alaska, has been in contact with the counterterrorism unit in Virginia that provides monitoring for all of the communication of the plaintiff while he has been incarcerated in the Communications Management Unit in both Marion, Illinois, and now Terre Haute, Indiana. So Terry Dodd has an FBI handler? I mean, it's just freaking sickening. How many billions of dollars did the FBI get? Like $9 billion in 2017? And everybody and their freaking brother is pulling in money from the FBI, and everybody's got to report to a handler? If you have an FBI handler, I don't care who you are, whether your name's Terry Dodd or whether you're one of the tens of thousands of FBI informants in this country, if you have an FBI handler, you're working for the children of the devil, and I hope they light up the fires of hell 10 times hotter for people like you. I don't have any respect for people with FBI handlers. So Terry Dodd's FBI handler is communicating, it appears, according to the statement of Elizabeth Sarver, with the CMU manager who manages Schaeffer Cox's communication. And they're working to derail Schaeffer's legal fundraising efforts. The CTU expressed concerns to the FBI in Anchorage about the direct appeal of the plaintiff's criminal conviction. It is our belief that the FBI coordinated with the CTU to have the money raised for the plaintiff's legal defense diverted elsewhere. This has made it difficult for the plaintiff to be able to hire private attorneys and investigators for his legal defense. The plaintiff has mailed in a motion to this court with the attachments that provide evidence from his FOIA returns. USP tracking number blah 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 indicates that the Terre Haute, Indiana CMU has blocked this legal mail from leaving the prison. Well, howdy ho! How about that? We got another example of the prison mailroom blocking and diverting mail. Isn't that a big surprise? It was mailed on the same day as 5 other documents that posted on May the 6th, 2019 to this case docket. There is another prisoner in Terre Haute CMU, Martin S. Gottesfeld, inmate number 12982-104, who filed as an exhibit in case number blah 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 document 50 in the Southern District of New York on May the 13th, 2019. It is the emergency ex parte motion for temporary restraining order that plaintiff Cox has attempted to submit to this court. It is enclosed in with this statement as Exhibit B. Prisoner Gottesfeld has also filed a statement of his involvement to help plaintiff Cox in document 49 of the same case. This is enclosed as Exhibit C. For these reasons, the plaintiff has filed a temporary restraining order on the prison in order that his legal mail may be submitted to this court. It is an outrage and a miscarriage of justice that a prisoner does not have access to the courts. I am petitioning that this court will compel the Federal Bureau of Investigations to allow the plaintiff's motion and attachments to be submitted to this case. This statement was mailed on May the 16th of 2019. That's today, by the way. Sincerely, Elizabeth A. Sarver. Now, you can go look up Martin Gottesfeld and in the BOP.gov, and you'll see that he shows that he's currently sitting in Terre Haute FCI, which is the same prison as Schaeffer Cox, and he's not going to be released until December of 2024. Also, it appears there is a webpage for Marty Gotts named freemartyg.com. And I don't know anything about martygg.com or Martin Gottesfeld. I need to educate myself about this man because he's a friend of Schaeffer Cox and he's stuck in the same prison, and it appears that he's trying to help Schaeffer. So he's got a website called freemartygg.com. I think we all need to go there and read through this and see and learn about Martin Gottesfeld. And then there's also an article on Martin Gottesfeld in the Huffington Post. So it appears that Martin Gottesfeld is quite a popular guy, although I just found out about him today. So let's go back to these letters. Now, this appears to be some kind of letter from Martin Gottesfeld to a judge. And let's just read it. Dear Judge Gardepi, the wife of the defendant is not an attorney in this case, nor does she wish to. Let me say this. I've been told that Martin Gottesfeld has been thrown in the hole in the CMU, which is the worst place in America, for releasing all these documents. He's trying to get messages out to help Schaeffer and to help himself, and I've been told they put him in the hole. I've also been told that if the Bureau of Prisons, if Warden J.R. Bell gets his way, that Martin Gottesfeld will never talk to his wife again. And you might say to yourself, there's no way they can do that. I want you to go talk to Kurt Johnson, because Kurt Johnson is also in the CMU, and Kurt Johnson cannot talk to his wife. So don't tell me they can't do that. Let's read this again. The wife of the defendant is not an attorney in this case, nor does she wish to address any legal merits here. However, she feels compelled to inform the Honorable Court of a change in Mr. Gottesfeld's circumstances. Mr. Gottesfeld has been in weekday daily communication with his family via scheduled calls, emails, and postal mail from FCI Terre Haute. However, the last time Mr. Gottesfeld was heard from in any form of communication was Friday, April the 26th at approximately 7:50 p.m. So they appear to cut off the communication for these guys anytime they want to. The radio silence does not appear due to prison lockdowns, down communication lines, or voluntary actions by Mr. Gottesfeld. On the last call, Mr. Gottesfeld expressed grave concern about how the Bureau of Prisons personnel at FCI Terre Haute has taken steps to interfere with his mail to the Southern District of New York. On that call, Mr. Gottesfeld clarified his intentions to notify the Honorable Court of these developments. But given that it has not appeared on the docket yet, that he is effectively rendered incommunicado to his family's understanding, it is feared he is being denied that opportunity. Well, I don't doubt that one little bit. As a matter of fact, you got this Huffington Post article on Martin Gottesfeld, but I want you guys to go to your favorite search engine and type in CBS Alabama prisons. Click on this news story right here. Investigation finds Alabama prison conditions are unconstitutional. And if you listen to this news piece, you will be, if you're a decent human being, you will be absolutely horrified at the conditions in Alabama prisons, and that the CBS considers them breaking cruel and unusual punishment, that they're absolutely horrific. And if they can do this in Alabama, they are certainly doing it in the CMUs. Let's go back to the letter. It's the Eighth Amendment. They're cruel and unusual punishment. They're torturing people and they're killing people. I don't know how to say it anymore. You guys don't give a damn. They're beheading people in prison, and if they're not doing it themselves, they're coordinating it with the Muslims. And they're doing it to people that are as retaliation for legal action against the abuses of the prison. Let's continue. To follow through with his wishes, and rather than summarize and risk losing details in translation, the defendant's wife is submitting a partial transcript of his last call, which covers what Mr. Gottesfeld would have filed about how the Bureau of Prisons is interfering with filings and communications between the plaintiff in this case and the Honorable Court. Sincerely, Dana Gottesfeld, spouse of the plaintiff. So it appears that Dana Gottesfeld transcribed her phone call. Let's snoop in and read this document. Relevant portion of transcript of last CMU between Mr. and Miss Gottesfeld before Mr. Gottesfeld went incommunicado. Friday, April the 6th at 7:49. Marty. Now this is Schaeffer's friend in CMU prison. Marty. I think the Office of Inspector General, and just for the record, I have notified the Office of Inspector General about the murder of Robert David Neal and about the illegal banning of me and about the illegality of the CMU prison. I think that the Office of Inspector General from the Department of Justice needs to come down here and interview inmates and staff, because the CTU, which is the unit of the Bureau of Prisons that's responsible for monitoring mail and stuff, is interfering with mail to and from the court. They're actually stopping people from making filings, which is a serious trespass onto the access of the courts. And there's more to that. Also, there is a shoe here that its own separate shoe, distinct from the shoe used for the rest of the guys on the compound. I'm not sure what you've read from the docketings of the Southern District docket, but I mentioned it in an affidavit there. But there's a steam pipe that runs directly underneath the shoe here in the CMU that makes the floor in the shoe so hot you can literally cook food on it. In fact, guys in the dining room in the building cooked burritos on this floor just based off the heat off of the steam pipe. The administration knows about it. They're deliberately indifferent to it. They lock guys up in there, and it is basically a form of torture, and it shocks the conscience, but they continue to do it anyway. It's mostly the administration's fault. It's something they actually, even like the everyday line staff, are not very comfortable with, but yet they're seriously teaching going anyway. There's no ventilation in the shoe here, and the water is contaminated. It causes us to convulsify and have severe diarrhea. There's also a lot of sleep deprivation going on there because there's constant noise. They don't allow guys in the shoe here to have their legal work despite imminent deadlines. They won't allow them to have stamps. Hey, if you want to know why they put Martin Gottesfeld in the hole, it's because he's telling his wife what the hell's going on in the CMU. They don't allow guys in the shoe here to have legal work despite imminent deadlines. They won't allow them to have stamps, pen or paper to be able to mail the courts. This is part of the nature of the interference that I think the Office of Inspector General for the United States Justice Department needs to come down. Yeah, right. Ha! The fox in the henhouse. You think the Office of Inspector General has any sort of a soul, any sort of a conscience, any sort of a good character? He probably got appointed Inspector General because he's a devil just like the people in the CMU. Needs to come down here and interview some folks. The administration is well aware of all this stuff, and yet it is totally indifferent to these conditions. That shocks the conscience. What's more than that, there was actually an ISIS murder carried out here in November in the CMU that was covered up and is still being covered up by the Bureau of Prisons, CTU, which again runs this place. I think the Office of Inspector General staff should interview inmates and staff in the CTU about the inaudible and about the murder because the FBI was botched and late for work that it actually had to do in order to fully investigate this matter. And I think that as part of this investigation, as well as in the terms of investigating a whole bunch of other stuff that was destructed, the DOJ office and the Inspector General needs to interview both inmates and staff here, a silver unit manager named Swift. Okay, so now I was trying to help another inmate here with some legal work for a very interesting case where it looks like the FBI sent an informant to steal this inmate's defense book. And they don't want this inmate to be able to go forward with this lawsuit because they don't want to expose what the FBI did in terms of stealing his legal funds. So I'm protected by a good swath of Supreme Court case law, very well established, going back to the 60s and 70s. But the text for the right of inmates to help other inmates legal work, provided that they're not getting anything of value and audible that I clearly was not. This inmate needed information in order to be able to fill out what's called a US 385 form, to have the marshals be able to serve process on defendants who have hidden, possibly with the assistance of government, and who are hiding from SCOTUS, and who are hiding from discovery and depositions and being put on the witness stand, having to testify under oath and all of this stuff. So they wrote me up a disciplinary charge for trying to help this inmate despite the very clear Supreme Court precedent. And my understanding is that basically no matter what the law says, once your shot is written up, they'll punish you in blatant defiance of the law. Please note shot is synonymous with write-up in the BOP. And if you try to tell the court about it, they're going to block the courts from hearing about it. So I intend to file about this in the Southern District of New York, and there's also a docket in District of Colorado. And the case number, all of these documents are going to be uploaded to Schaeffer's webpage. And I'm sure if you need them, you send an email to me and I'll mail them to you. But we will make sure these documents are available so you can get the correct case numbers. Citation added, a long list of URL. And I think you should watch the docket for filings in that regard as well. The BOP employee in the CTU, which again I believe is interfering with inmates' access to the courts and which is covering an ISIS planned murder that occurred in the CMU last November, that employee's name is named Richard Blythe. That's a child of the devil right there. Richard Blythe, child of the devil. As far as I'm concerned, what I just told you can be available under the latest Creative Commons, my attribution, no derivative, share alike, commercial use permitted license for whoever wants this, as far as I'm concerned. Dana, what happened after the write-up? Marty, I've notified everyone here in the terms of the staff that I've shown them the applicable case in the Supreme Court, that they know that this is blatantly illegal. I've told them that I will move to have them stripped of qualified immunity because what they're doing is blatantly illegal, and they know or should know there's really no way for them to continue with this. I think you know it's the bigger thing dealing with suppression, and it's a bigger thing dealing with a lot of the issues that I've discussed on this call. Keep in mind, this is a phone call from a prisoner inmate to his wife, and it's a bigger thing dealing with a lot of issues I've discussed on this call. And I think it's a blatant attempt to try to intimidate a journalist away from covering all this stuff I just mentioned. I think it's a distractionary measure in what is as much of a larger goal of theirs. And there should be these docketings in Southern District of New York. Citation added, Gottesfeld versus Horwitz. And that docket for Colorado. And if this docketing does not show up, then I think the OIG definitely needs to take a very big interest of what happened to these docketings. I would name the inmate who was killed, but I fear for my safety if I were to do that. I'll do it. The inmate's name was Robert David Neal, so I'm speaking a little hushed. I would fear for my safety if I were to name the inmate to you right now. If the office of Inspector General were to come down here, though, I would happily talk with them about the matter. Dana, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Marty, I'm a journalist now, and that comes with certain responsibilities, and I take them very seriously. How far are we into this call? 9.5 minutes. Marty, I didn't even get a chance to ask them. I didn't even get a chance to ask them about making that call up because I inaudible lockdown for an entire morning. And then, what do you call it? And then as soon as they got wind of what I was becoming aware of, they broke their shot. And I believe their ultimate goal for that shot is to cut off all my communications. Dana, do you think they're going to do that? Marty, I don't know. I think that's their goal. Keep in mind that it's now May the 16th, and this happened on, I think, April the 26th. So they have cut off all his communications. They did exactly what he was talking about. I don't know what they're going to do, what they're going to succeed in that goal. You know, the case law in this matter is overwhelmingly abundantly clear, and I think it's really telling that of all, that's the only thing they can try, right? They have to come up with some inaudible, bogus, and contrived scenario, and this kind of the best that they could do, apparently. I expect more retaliation, including being placed in the shoe. If you stop hearing from me, you should assume that I am being brutally tortured in violation of the First and Eighth Amendments, and now the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution, as well as duly ratified and binding international humanitarian accords, including the Convention Against Torture, by getting placed in the shoe for investigating that and extended for prolonged periods of time. You know, they would never use words like torture. They'll get somebody like John Brennan to call it enhanced interrogation techniques. I'm going to try to send out a written statement about all of this, and we're going to see if it actually ends up going out. But you should be expecting the inaudible Southern District of New York docket mailed early next week. You should take a look at that Colorado docket. You should be expecting to see the statement from me to you and a bunch of other folks going over in detail and writing basically all the things I just told you. You think they're going to let him put that in a letter and let it get out of there? Please note, the quality of the call was less than clear at certain points, and this was the best that could be transcribed under the circumstances. So what you got here is a wife of a prisoner, and she's sharp enough to have transcribed the call as best as she can, because she realizes that she may not hear from her husband again. And so she did a very smart thing in transcribing the call. She probably recorded it in order to transcribe it. Now I'm going to read you this document. I got two more. We're going to take our time, like I said. Note it. What's that, babe? It's only 5 pages, and the next one's only... Yeah, it's only 5 pages. My wife wants to walk around the block, but I'm going to finish this. Plaintiff Martin Gottesfeld, acting pro se, hereby notifies the Honorable Court of his filing on the accompanying sworn statement regarding the Federal Bureau of Prisons of an ISIS-inspired murder inside the Communications Management Unit at the Federal Correctional Institute in Terre Haute, Indiana. The plaintiff has come to understand that the name of the murder victim is Robert David Neal, and that he was approximately 68 years old at the time of his death last November. The plaintiff has also come to understand that another victim, Mr. Richard Warren, survived multiple stab wounds in the same spree. It is unclear to the plaintiff if the FBI has been able to speak to Mr. Warren. The plaintiff has come to understand that the alleged killer, Mr. Rodney Hamrick, was a U.S. Army soldier prior to converting to Islam inside the FCI Terre Haute CMU. So you got an Army soldier named Rodney Hamrick. We now know the name of the murderer. The plaintiff has also come to understand that the FCI Terre Haute CMU unfortunately functions largely as a radicalize and release program due to its sequestered nature and its concentrated demographics. The plaintiff has further come to understand that the public was not told that this murder occurred inside the FCI Terre Haute CMU, but rather was led to believe that it occurred in general population. The plaintiff does not lend credence to the FBOP's dubious assertion that the FCI Terre Haute CMU is a general population unit. The plaintiff also has heard what he considers to be credible accounts from multiple witnesses that there was a concerted and organized effort by FBOP personnel, including Mr. Clint Swift and the FBOP's Counterterrorism Unit, or CTU, to cover up. To cover up what? To cover up the murder, the coordinated murder of Robert David Neal, who had a legal lawsuit against the BOP and Charles E. Samuels Jr., respectfully mailed and filed in accordance with Houston versus LAC on Monday, April the 29th, 2019. And that's a certificate of service by Martin Gottesfeld. And then we have a core links email that I'm going to read as well. Let's get started, and then the next one is 29 pages. My goodness, we need to read this whole thing. I tell you what, we're at 30 minutes. I'll read this in part 2, right? I cannot do this in one part. I'll make this part 2, but let's get this up on YouTube right now.